Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Betsy Bohan and I'm a nurse of over 40 years with a passion for helping people. This video is part 3 of my testimony story, my freedom story, called The Social Worker's Daughter, The Power of Love, Faith, and Forgiveness. If you have not seen my introduction video or parts 1 and 2, I would recommend watching those because it gives you a context for which to understand part 3. So this is life. My videos are not meant for children or younger viewers as they contain adult content. From number 2 or part 2, The Descent, the remainder of the videos do contain things that might be upsetting for some viewers, such as various abuses and occurrences and just different things that you might find uncomfortable, but you may not. The one thing that I do want you to know is that all that I tell you, even the bad things, have a purpose. And that purpose is to allow you to see the depth of where I was, my descent, and just where Jesus found me and where He would bring me to. Now, you can make the choice whether you want to watch it or not. But I do assure you, in the end, God brings a whole transformation. Maybe not in this video, it may be for the next part, but it will surely come. So thanks again for joining me. And in this part 3, I'll be talking about my family's move to a larger city, a county seat, where my father has accepted the position for the Director of Welfare and Social Services, which is now known as Human Services. And we moved to this large town, into a big, beautiful old home that had once been owned by a doctor. And life rolls on with both challenges and opportunities. Again, thank you for joining me, and I'll be back in a moment with part 3. Now remember, too, this is my first time ever sharing my story publicly. It's been 48 years since my abuse ended, but I've never shared it, not even with many of my friends, many of them who have been friends for over 40 years, 20 years. They're just finding this out now. So, when I share it, I have written it down and I read it because to help me keep on topic and not to veer off. So here we go with part 3, So This Is Life. Part 3, So This Is Life. After working about 6 years as a social worker, my father accepted a position as the Director of Social Services and Welfare, or the Department of Human Services as it's called today, which meant a move to a larger town, a county seat. He and my mother purchased an older home that had 2 stories with a front porch that wrapped to the entrance. It was a home that my parents worked to bring out its beauty and character, and I loved it for many reasons. If I have calculated it right, we moved in January of 1969 and I was in the middle of 5th grade. When we moved, I had hope inside of me for better things. My father would be the director and wouldn't have to do the one-on-one visits like he had done in the former town. The house was much bigger and nicer than the one we had rented, and all the good things were in place. Mom was still making her delicious meals. We had music that floated from the console stereo in the front living room to the remainder of the house, and there were new parks and places to explore for family picnics. My mother and father were involved in the local Catholic church, which was a beautiful cathedral. This built to replicate a cathedral elsewhere in Europe. She sang in the choir, and my father did readings at the Mass. The church was enormous, with marble floors and massive marble columns. Stained glass windows of various saints and angels throughout the ornate building. I secretly wished I would see one of those statues smile at me like the stories I had heard as a child, but they never did. I really wanted baby Jesus to smile at me, but I finally put that thought aside, realizing I was probably silly for even thinking it. I attended the school that was part of that parish. I made friends quickly and was soon enjoying my new school and classmates. It felt perfect. The friendships I made were key in keeping me from going down a dark path. A path my friends didn't know about, and neither did I until later in life. It wasn't long, I don't know exactly how long, maybe months, when the behavior of my father, which had started in the kitchen at the prior home, began again in full force at our new home. I have no idea how it even happened, but again, he shook me, hit me, my mother would scream, the door to the basement would open, and I would be thrown over the stairs to the landing below. Only this time, instead of hitting the side door, it was the hanging coats with their hooks underneath. I would finish my trip to the bottom of the steps in the basement and sit there until my family was done eating and my mom would call me up. Then I would eat my meal in the kitchen alone. When my father would lose his temper with me in other places of the house because it was so large, it was usually on the first floor, and he would yell at me to get upstairs. I would turn to do this, and often it seemed just that act of turning my back to him would trigger him again, and he would chase me, and if he caught me, he would beat me again. I could never run fast enough. Even if I made it upstairs and slid under the bed, his arm would reach me and his hand would grasp me and pull me out. I realized there was no safe place for me in this new home either. My mother began to meet me at the side door on the days my father had a particularly difficult day at work, and she would warn me, saying, "Your father has had a hard day at work today. Go up to your room and stay there until I tell you it's safe to come down." Or she might say, "Go hide in your room until I tell you it's safe to come down." I listened to my mother and did as she told me, but I never knew if when she called it was really safe. My mother stopped telling me to shut my mouth. It had been 8 years of abuse now, and by now she knew it was not my fault, but my father's. My boundaries had been so broken down by my father that others were able to violate me in different ways. There were children in the area who were sexually expressive toward each other, and they pulled me in at times. I lost my virginity at the age of 12. It was not from any love, not even lust, but more like a science experiment gone wrong. These are the parts I don't like to bring up, but I believe this type of behavior happened back then more than we know, and I truly believe it happens today, maybe even more, and probably so because of cell phones and the internet. Something in my heart at that time told me what was going on was wrong, and I stopped participating. I kept this all hid from my parents. These things only served to confuse me more, and I began to doubt if I was loved at all by anyone. I started to have suicidal ideations. I could see the differences between my family and my friends' families. I was lost, and I wanted the love of my parents back, the love I had known those first 6 years of life. During these times, I would lay on my bed and wonder if my parents would even cry for me if I died. I would picture my funeral, them crying, and realizing what I felt like. It was a very dark place. This also began a time when I explored other belief systems, even though I still went to Mass every Sunday at the cathedral and during our parochial school. I ordered my astrology chart to be done and then ripped it up after I got it because it seemed strange and weird and just didn't seem like I should order my life from that. I briefly considered using white witchcraft to make my parents love me again, but I couldn't exactly see how white witchcraft was that much safer or better than being a regular witch. There was a book I found on mind control, and I thought it was safer than trying to use incantations. I remember I would go down from my room to stand in the dark foyer where I could see my mother sitting on the couch while she was watching TV. I would look intently at her head and try to transfer my thoughts to her mind by silently repeating, "Please love me. Please love me." It breaks my heart to think about it now. I only tried it a couple times because I thought how pointless it was to try to make someone love me. I don't even remember what I asked. Oh, and then I thought I bought a Ouija board because it was a popular activity back then. But I tried several times to do it myself. And I asked it questions, and it started to move on its own, which really creeped me out. I wasn't sure if I accidentally moved the pointer, but it frightened me enough to put it away and never do it again. I told no one I was doing these things. No one but me knew how hated I felt or how desperate I was to be loved and valued. I believed my friends liked me, but over the years of my father's abuse, I lost any sense and understanding of love. I thought love was hugging and holding, and hate was kicking and hitting. I remember when Jim Croce, a famous singer and musician, died, I cried and said it would have been better if I had died, since no one loved me anyway and I hadn't done anything important. I had no clue what love was, but I knew I wanted it. I entered junior high and high school, and like many of my girlfriends, I wanted a boyfriend. But any relationship that became more than a friendship never lasted long because I became afraid and I had no idea how to even have a relationship. Even though I did want this, I would always somehow break it off with the fella. If he didn't break it off, I would make up various reasons to break up due to my fears. So I never really dated much at all. During my growing up years, my parents were frugal because of their experience living through the Depression, so I wore many hand-me-downs. I had to wait for clothes to go through both my sisters unless one of my aunts sent me clothes from her daughter. I remember being so excited to get those packages because the clothes were cute and had only been worn by one person before me. Sometimes my mom would make us clothes, or clothes would be purchased for us before school or for holidays. One day, a friend of mine took me to a department store, and she talked me into stealing some small clothing items. We both stole the same thing. I think we were about in 7th grade. For her, it was probably her only time, and I think her mother and father found out. But for me, it opened a portal, and it was to serve two purposes for me. First, it allowed me to get the clothes I wanted, and secondly, it was a way to get back at my parents for hurting me without verbally saying, "I hate you." I couldn't admit I had any hate in my heart for them, my father for his abuse or my mother for not stopping him. Now, my mother, as I found out as an adult, did tell two people about what was going on. One was a priest, but neither of these individuals did anything to help us. Now, things were different back then. And even when my mother was in her 70s and she apologized to me, and she told me she had no idea how she would support all of us children, because even back then, as I found out recently, women couldn't even get a credit card in their names until 1974, when the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was signed into law. Even in the 1960s, women had to have their husband's co-signature, and banks could even refuse a single woman an application for a credit card. But of course, as a child and a teen, I didn't have any knowledge of this. I only knew that I was being horribly mistreated, and there was no one that would rescue me or help me or save me. I truly didn't want to hate anyone. And how could I hate them? I desperately wanted their love. It was a counselor who later helped me figure this out. But at that time, it was totally confusing, and I continued to fall apart inside. At one point, when I was 14, I was so tired of the abuse, I thought I would run away to a metro city several hours away. I remember I was thinking I could take a bus there, but then I remembered once I was there, I was too young to get a real job. But I just thought, why no? I'll just become a prostitute. At least I'll get some loving because I'll get some hugging and holding. It's really sad to think that I could have even said that in such a manner. I remember this was probably because that thought probably came to me because of one of the homes where I babysat. There were some trashy novels in the drawers in the living room tables. And I read portions of the books, and it made the life of a prostitute or call girl seem glamorous. Now, right there should show you just how far the descent had taken me. But miraculously, here is also the first time I heard what I knew to be the voice of God. I never heard a voice like this before, and never clearly. I don't know what the voice of God sounded like. I didn't know back then. But somehow I knew it was God. I heard the voice say to me, "They beat their girls too." In response, I said, "Oh, I've already been beaten by my own dad. I don't need anybody else to beat me." So I decided I would just do my best in school, get a job, and when I was older, I would move out on my own. I was so desperate to get away from being hurt. I even thought about hiding out in my high school so I could still go to class but not be at home. But it didn't take me long to figure out that was not going to work, and I had to be more realistic. Now, regarding this voice of God, there were 2 more times I heard that same voice during this period of abuse. One was when I was laying in my bed. I was perhaps in the first year or 2 of high school. My sister I shared the room with was not present. As I lay there, it seemed like my life and what had been happening to me began to crash down on me like a torrential rain. And it felt like waves of sorrow and pain were pulling me down. I began to roll like a log on my bed with my hands to my face, wondering what to do. I felt like I was about to lose my mind. Just then, my knees, which were pulled up to my chest, hit the side of the old metal radiator that heated our bedroom. It was right next to my bed. At that same time, I heard the voice again, and it said, "It's okay. You're going to be okay." And a peace and a calm came over me. The other time I heard the voice, God's voice, was this. My father, although he was abusive, would still try to reach out to me or do things for me in between the beatings. He knew I had loved horses since I was very young. He could not have missed it because when we would go on drives that went through the country as a family, I sometimes sat on the seat behind him and would sing softly into the back of his head or ears, "Oh, I want a horse, I want a horse, I want a horse." This was before I was 6. When he found out one of his staff at his new position in the county seat had some horses, my father would take me to see them, and I would get to ride them. It was always a favorite time of ours, and it softened the edges of the rough times, at least just a bit. Well, knowing this love of mine, my dad made a riding crop for me from a short branch and leather to use when I went riding. I think it was also sort of a peace offering. I was very happy with it, and it did touch my heart in a special way. I knew somewhere inside of him he had to care for me. Well, One day I was upset with myself for something I had done wrong. It might have even just been an attitude I had that I didn't like, and I grabbed that crop that was meant for a horse and started to hit my legs. I had shorts on, and I hit both legs over and over and over again, saying repeatedly, "You're a bad girl. You're bad. You're bad. You're a bad girl." Over and over I struck myself. My legs were red with welts, and I was about to lay in on myself again when I heard a voice. It seemed to be that it was that same voice, and it seemed to come in from the window that was open to let the summer breeze in. I immediately stopped and listened. I knew it was God this time for sure. I heard him say, "You don't need to do that. Jesus did that for you. He died for your sins and he loves you. Don't hurt yourself anymore." I began to cry and dropped to my knees in front of the open window and looked out. The only words I could say after that was, "Thank you, God. Thank you." I kept the riding crop, but never used it to beat myself again. Years later, I broke it and tossed it out with those memories of using it on myself. Other things that built into my life at this time were some special friends and their families. My closest friend at the time had a wonderful family, and her dad was an instructor and gymnastics coach at the local university. My friend was a talented gymnast. I was never as good as her, but the time spent in the gym, at her house, and with her family on picnics or other activities began to make me realize families could be different. Another friend also had a nice family, and they had a cabin that they would bring me to at times during the summer. It was like a bit of heaven for me. She and I would also study together in high school. These friends and their families were like glue in my life and came into my life at just the right time. I had been contemplating joining a gang at one point prior to this, because my heart had become like a stone from the years of abuse. I just wanted to belong somewhere. God knew and sent me these dear friends and their families. Yet even they never knew what was going on at my home, because our home and family appeared normal, and my father and mother were upstanding people in the community and church. With renewed effort, I continued to work hard in school and be involved in various sports and academic clubs. I won awards and was elected to various positions and things I tried out for. My sense of humor and love for people helped me to cope. I had a hope things could be different, but I still had no idea how that would occur. I turned 16 in the middle of all this and began to work part-time after school and in the summer. Here again, the really hard thing was there was such a dichotomy in our family due to my father's abuse and behavior. As far as I'm concerned, we had good times too. We had gifts at Christmas. For our birthdays, we got to choose the cake and meal our mom made for us. And plus, we had picnics and outings we enjoyed. There were many good things, and as I explained before, my father was a kind man to others and was a respected member of the community and church. He was a social worker and he helped many, many others. And yet even he didn't understand why he did what he did to me. How do I know this? Because after a particularly bad beating in my teens, I was sitting on my bed in the room I shared with my sister. She wasn't there. The door was open to the hall. I was about 14 at the time, I think, and my father came to the open door and looked at me with sad eyes and said, "Betsy, honey, Daddy doesn't know why Daddy does it, but Daddy's so sorry." I looked at him with a heavy heart and I said, "I'm sorry, Daddy. but I can't forgive you because you'll just do it again." He lowered his face and turned away. He looked sad, but I felt, what was I to do? I had heard his apologies for years, especially at the beginning, and nothing had changed. What hope was there for change anyway? He seemed to look like a broken man to me, but I was broken too. I think he had found my diary to God hidden beneath the floorboards up in the attic. I had asked in my diary, I had asked God why my daddy beat me when I tried so hard to be good. I never found my diary to God after that, and I didn't ask my father if he had found it. My only control over the abuse was when I chose not to run anymore when he came after me or told me to get upstairs, because after all, running didn't help or stop anything. I decided I would also not cry when he hit me. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing he hurt me. These decisions were made in just minutes, as at a time when my father, in the dead, had risen from his chair, and was coming to beat me because I had looked at him in some way that he didn't like. I didn't even understand what he meant about "don't look at me that way," and I didn't know how I looked at him or what I looked at him for. So as he came to get me, I stood up and I acted like a mannequin. I was motionless, dead, lifeless until he was done. I didn't let out one sound as he hit me. I was silent. When he was done, he sat back in his chair, and I turned and walked up to my room. I would never cry in front of him again. But I would cry as I hid in fetal positions in the hallway closet behind the vacuum cleaner, or in my closet behind the hanging clothes. This affected me long into my life, and I knew if I ever married, it would be to a man who I felt safe enough to cry with. And I did, but it wasn't until I was 35 years of age. But now we are going on 28 years of marriage. Now back to the plan I had figured out would save me. I had settled on school and education being my way out. So I needed to figure out how I could get money for college. Part of my plan was to enter a state beauty pageant for teenage girls. I wanted to win so I could obtain a scholarship. It was an effort to get myself free. After sending in my application, I waited, hoping I would be selected as a contestant. After several weeks of waiting, a letter arrived and informed me I was chosen to be in the pageant. My mother and father were very proud of me, and my mom busied herself with helping me to prepare. As the day of the pageant approached in the summer of 1975, I was excelling in school and was selected from the junior students in the high school to be one of the 2 recipients of the Girls State Award. It was a very special honor, and I was thrilled. The girls awarded from all over the state would travel to the capital to learn about government. It seemed like something was changing. But would it be for the better, or would it just lead to more false hopes? So I want to thank you for joining me. Yes, it's exciting because now we're going to be finding out, are these new things that are happening in my life going to bring me freedom? Is it going to rescue me from my trials? Is it going to be something that's good, or is it going to be just false hopes again? Because I know I had false hopes for many, many years. I will give you a hint. that the title of part 4 is called A Divine Rescue. But I guarantee you cannot even guess how or when or where this rescue occurs. So I hope to see you back in part 4 of my story, The Social Worker's Daughter, the Power of Love, Faith, and Forgiveness. Now, just to let you know, you're going to have to wait another week for it, because between now and then I am going to be posting a special video where I share some of my poetry that I've written in spoken word, and I hope to also be sharing with you videos or photos of some of my art pieces that I have done in the past. So we'll see how that comes together. I'm going to enjoy editing all that together to make a special gift for you for watching and my videos and listening, and I think it will bless you. So thank you so much again for joining me. I pray God's richest blessings on you. I pray that He guide you and lead you and bless you and enlarge your tent. So thank you once again. Bye until later.